Imagine a world where you're always available. You pick up every call. You respond to every message. You're there for every crisis. You show up even when you're exhausted, overwhelmed, or silently falling apart inside. You're the friend everyone relies on, the co-worker who never says no, the partner who's always ready to listen, the sibling who always helps, the parent who sacrifices without rest, the person who never seems to need a break. It seems noble, doesn't it? But what happens to you? What happens to your soul when your value is measured only by your availability to others? What happens to your identity when your worth is wrapped around how useful you are? What if I told you that everything changes the moment you stop being constantly available? Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, once suggested that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate. This unconscious need to always be there for others. It's not always kindness. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's conditioning. And sometimes it's the hidden wound of needing to be needed. The hidden cost of constant availability. We are conditioned to be givers. From a young age, we're taught that selflessness is a virtue. We're praised for putting others first. We're applauded when we go the extra mile even when we're running on empty. But here's the truth. When you're always available to others, you become unavailable to yourself. Think about that. How often do you cancel your own rest to show up for someone else? How often do you silence your own voice so another can speak? How often do you deny your feelings so others feel comfortable? You give and give and give until there's nothing left to give. And then what? You begin to feel invisible, resentful, drained, exhausted in ways you can't even explain. You smile, but you're numb inside. You function, but you're disconnected from your own joy. You listen to others, but no one seems to hear you. And slowly, quietly, something inside you begins to whisper, "Is this all I am?" Why we fear saying no. Why is it so hard to say no? Why does setting a boundary feel like betrayal? Why does choosing yourself feel like abandonment? The answer lies deep in our subconscious. It's tied to our upbringing, our social systems, our survival mechanisms. Maybe you learned that love must be earned, that approval comes through sacrifice, that you're lovable only when you're useful, that saying no makes you selfish, that you don't matter unless you're meeting someone else's needs. And so, you learn to shape-shift, to adapt, to overextend, to prove your worth through service. But this is not love. This is performance. And performing 24/7 for approval is the fastest way to lose yourself. The awakening when you start saying no. And then one day, something inside you shifts. Maybe it's burnout. Maybe it's a mental breakdown. Maybe it's a spiritual awakening. Maybe it's the quiet realization that you're tired of being tired. And you do the unthinkable. You say no. You let the phone ring. You don't respond to that late-night text. You don't jump to fix the problem. You choose silence over explanation, rest over guilt, boundaries over burnout. And in that moment, everything changes. Not because others suddenly change, but because you do. The first pushback when people notice. Make no mistake, when you stop being available, people will notice. Some will be confused. Others will be angry. They'll say you've changed, that you're not the same, that you're distant, cold, or even selfish. But what they really mean is this: you're no longer convenient for me. You've stepped out of the role they placed you in. And that makes them uncomfortable. Because the moment you stop being emotionally available, you stop being predictable. And people don't like when their sources of comfort begin to prioritize themselves. They may guilt trip you, shame you, question your loyalty, accuse you of abandonment, but hold firm, because their discomfort is not your responsibility. Your healing does not require their permission. Self-reclamation, meeting yourself again when you stop being available to everyone. Something beautiful happens. You become available to yourself. You hear your own thoughts again. You feel your emotions without filtering them through someone else's pain. You remember what peace feels like. You rediscover passions you buried long ago. You start to dream again, not about fixing others, but about building your own life. You look in the mirror and slowly, gently, begin to see you. Not the helper, not the fixer, not the savior, but you, the human behind the role. This is the path of individuation, a term Jung used to describe the process of becoming whole, of integrating all the parts of yourself, even the ones you've long ignored. The ripple effect, changing the dynamic. Here's what they don't tell you. When you stop being emotionally available all the time, you give others a chance to grow. Your absence becomes their challenge. Your boundary becomes their invitation to step up. Some will rise. They'll learn to self-soothe. They'll find their strength. They'll stop leaning on you as a crutch and start walking on their own. Others will resist. They'll fall into drama. They'll project their wounds onto you. They'll blame you for their discomfort. But neither reaction is your burden to carry. Your only job is to stay rooted in your truth, to honor your energy, to preserve your peace, to hold space for yourself the way you've held space for others. Because when you change the dynamic, you change the relationship. And sometimes that means the old version of the relationship must die for a healthier one to be born. The new definition of worth. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Let that sink in. Your worth is not measured by how many people you please, not by how quickly you respond, not by how many problems you solve, not by how available you are. Your worth is in your being, not your doing. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to disconnect. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to walk away from roles that no longer serve you. And most of all, you are allowed to love yourself enough to put yourself first, embracing the silence. There will be quiet seasons, seasons where you pull away, where you stop answering calls, where you leave texts unread, where you sit with your own stillness. In these seasons, the noise fades, the distractions dim, and all that's left is you. And it's in this silence that you begin to rebuild, to rewire your nervous system, to reconnect with your soul, to remember what you truly want apart from everyone else's expectations. Silence is not isolation. It is recalibration, and it is necessary. Because in a world that's always demanding your attention, presence is rebellion, stillness is power, and choosing you is the greatest act of liberation. The balance availability with boundaries. Now, let's be clear. Stopping your constant availability doesn't mean shutting people out. It means shifting the foundation. You can still be loving, generous, supportive, but from a full cup, not an empty one. You respond on your time. You help when it aligns with your energy. You show up when you want to, not when you feel obligated to. This is where healthy, mutual, reciprocal relationships thrive, where both people hold space for each other, where yes is honest and no is respected, where your presence is a gift, not a given. This is what emotional maturity looks like. And it begins the moment you realize you don't have to be available to everyone to be valuable. This is where the magic begins. So, What really happens when you stop being available? You change. Your relationships change. Your world shifts. You stop chasing validation. You start choosing peace. You stop performing. You start being. You become less reactive and more intentional, less exhausted and more empowered, less needed and more respected. This is not the end of your connection with others. It's the beginning of a deeper connection with yourself. You no longer live at the mercy of other people's expectations. You live rooted in your truth, and in that truth, you find freedom. And that, my friend, is where the magic begins. So breathe, take the step, pull back, say no, reclaim your peace. And remember, when you stop being available, everything changes. But what changes most is you.